is Joseph Carlson, and this is episode 22 of The Grief of Politics. I am here with Avin Carroll. Avin, how you doing?
Doing good. How are you guys doing today? All the audience out there.
Right, there's the four people. It's cool, 4 people. Yeah, I mean, this episode, it was your choice last month. So this episode, this month, you wanted to talk about energy, like energy needs, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. You and I have been, I did on the last episode put a link to Matt Undecided because we both like his content. He talks a lot about energy, and we were talking about water and energy consumption. And you were like, we just need to talk about energy. So here we are talking about energy.
I think a large part of that last week, as we were talking about it, it really just kept in the front of my mind this concept of energy shortages. And at that point, it was kind of in the news, or had recently been in the news because of the brownouts in California.
Mm-hmm. Possible. They were well, unless there was another one. I know some of them were averted.
They ended up not having any brownouts that I know, but they definitely ended up having to ask people to ask citizens to reduce their energy usage during peak times of the day.
People did. I think we pointed out last episode, people did do that, which is pretty extreme, right?
Yeah.
And I think it actually curtails into one of the articles you sent about energy usage, which I thought was good. I think the LA Times article.
And I specifically chose that particular article because it highlights kind of the issue that I'm seeing, that I'm concerned with, that's been kind of talked about. So, we were talking about water last month, and water in particular, we've got this sort of looming crisis. We're already starting to experience water shortages in the West, US.
I actually didn't share it with you, but I went on Cairo 7 last night, their weather watcher, because they're doing smoke alerts because we have forest fires around us in Washington State. And they did say from some weather services that it has been an incredibly dry October and that we won't really get any rainfall until the end of the month.
Yeah.
And even that, there's a 25% chance of rainfall. So people are already tracking it. I think what I thought was interesting about this is you did share an article. I didn't write it down. I wrote down the stuff that I thought was really interesting, and I really picked a lot of stuff from the LA Times article. And one of the other articles from the Gov, they talked about the Inflation Reduction Act and some of the energy there. But there was something out of there that I picked out that I think is surprising, that will surprise you. But the one thing, a lot of people are saying, and we've talked about it, will we have enough energy to power an all clean future, whether it be electric, solar, whatever. And it seems like, I know Elon Musk said that, we need to double capacity, which is true because you just need to anyway. And we need to work on battery solutions. But some of these articles were brought up, not just the LA Times, but the other ones like the US Gov one. It seems like we do kind of have an overcapacity right now. One of them brought up the example of everybody would have to charge everything all at one moment, which would be very difficult to do. We would still be able to.
That was the LA Times article.
Yeah. Which I thought was interesting. And I think some of this is not to say that it's not hard and not overblown, but it does seem like we're headed in a better direction, which made me feel a little bit better about reading these. It seems like, there is kind of an infrastructure there.
Sort of the thesis on why I was so interested in this particular topic is because, there's this big push. There's been a lot of controversy lately because Washington, California, other states have alluded that they're moving to. I think other states have already also passed initiatives or rules or laws that they're moving this direction, that there will be no more internal combustion car sales by certain dates. I think Washington's 2035, or maybe it's 2030. California's 2035. And initially I'm like, what? That's impossible. There is no way we could convert entire fleets that way. So reading through the LA Times article, which just since we've referenced it quite a bit, I will.
Yeah, we might as well get into it.
Go back to that article just so we know. So this article was, freaking pop-ups. It's one of the reasons I don't like reading news online. This article was written in.
I have it up. Do you want me to? It was published on October 1st, 2020 by Michael Hiltzik.
Oh, I just had pop-ups. It was blocking me. So Yeah.
Yeah.
Hiltzik, October 1st, 2020 in the LA Times. And uh, sort of this premise that we're moving this direction has had some misnomers, right? Like a lot of the stuff in the news, particularly in conservative media, they're not talking about is exactly how these laws are going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the big things that surprised me in this article, I wasn't aware of, is exactly how it's going to roll out, because it's not going to be overnight. There was discussion of people like internal combustion engine vehicles are going to be on the road till like 2060 or maybe even longer, because it takes time to phase vehicles out, and they're not going to force you to sell your internal combustion car and buy an electric car by the 2035 marker. They're just saying they won't sell any new internal combustion engine vehicles.
Right. And well, the thing is too, it's like, hopefully with tax incentives, and that goes to the U.S. Gov art here, is that they're changing tax credits and stuff to make it appeasing, or make it more appealing to people.
So that just easier in order to do it.
Right.
But even still, like Elon Musk talks about, and we'll cut over to that article in a little bit too, but Elon Musk had brought up that, like, hey, we're going to have to double our energy production in order to do it. Mm-hmm. So going through the topic of water really brought up front of mind kind of the same concept of, like, we're not building any new natural gas, coal, oil burning power plants. We're not building any new nuclear power plants. We're only doing solar. We're only doing electric. And for the most part throughout the United States. And those types of power generation, while becoming more and more efficient and becoming more and more affordable, also only work if there is wind or there is sun. And all of these articles kind of highlight the importance of energy storage.
Yeah, that was one thing that really appealed, that I got in the article, which I can read because I wrote the quote down. I thought it was really interesting. It was, there's actually a number. That's one thing I didn't write down. I wrote, it's way down here. Way down. This is the one thing I didn't write down. Let's see here. Oh, here we go. The technology challenge is being met, however, as utility-scale batteries have steadily become larger in capacity and lower in cost. The government's Energy Information Administration estimates the cost of energy storage fell by nearly 2/3 from 2015 to 2017 alone, from $21.53 to $834 per kilowatt hour. That is an amazing savings of, which I guess is, I know Tesla makes batteries for the home.
They also do industrial scale.
Right. There's other companies that are doing that, again,
there's other ways to do it too. Being the nerd that I am, there's a lot of technology news around energy storage right now about alternative ways of doing it. Heating or melting liquids or metals to store energy and heat. There's discussion about using excess energy production during the day to pump water up a hill, and then at nighttime run the water down and run turbines. There's discussions of doing gravity generation, where you use excess energy to lift large weights in towers, and then at night they run the opposite direction and run generators. So there's a lot of different and alternative ways of storing energy, but we have to develop them and we have to build them. And again, that's kind of where this, like, the concept of the energy crisis for me is coming from. Solar takes massive amounts of land and requires a lot of sun. And so in the winter months, when we have less sun and we need more energy for heating, it's more difficult. And the same thing is true for wind. They take massive amounts of land to do it. They're becoming more efficient. There's big pushes for offshore wind. Central US, we have large swaths of just wide open land that tends to be pretty windy. And so wind could be more reliable in those areas. But again, it's still like, what happens when the wind slows down?
Right. I think, I just had this big epiphany when we were like talking about all this and I was reading these. I think the problem with everything is not only traditional energy you want to get the most bang for your buck. And I think maybe we need to look at it like maybe different regions have different solutions to whatever, like the
For
coastal
sure.
areas. Like I've heard of tidal power where they put channels in the water and allow that to run turbines. They even said
Yep.
coral can grow through it and stuff, and it doesn't affect the generation.
Yep.
Like so us in the coast, we could like generate power that way because we're coastal states. But like the Southwest, maybe in a desert, they put solar panel arrays where it's totally inhospitable, but we hook up a grid to be able to transport power that
Right.
way to those areas. It's like, and there's nuclear facilities maybe out in the middle of the nowhere in the middle of the country where again the land is inhospitable, or hey, we've designated this much land in Wyoming because nothing is out here, and we can make a nuclear plant out here that'll generate needs to this many homes.
And you can transmit energy some pretty large distances, but eventually, it does diminish, and the efficiency of transmitting energy super long distances isn't very efficient. So again, trying to reach kind of the conclusion of my point here. So like my whole theory was that we're not going to produce enough energy,
Right.
that we're not doing things to produce enough energy, specifically in this move to electrify transportation within the United States. And the big takeaways from reading through all of this was, one, right now we probably don't produce enough even for what we have, and if everything were to switch over right now, we'd be in real trouble. But there are plans to continue to reinforce the grid with more renewable energy sources. There's a big push for energy storage. The challenges that we have in the current grid is flexibility. So like the energy issues that they had in California was just sort of a last year, with asking everyone to cut back on energy use.
I think it was this year because it was this summer, I think.
Yep. I think it was largely driven by, it was high demand. Smoke had reduced capacity in solar, which highlights one of the big weaknesses in solar. Energy storage isn't fantastic, and being able to spin up the other forms of electricity to get oil up and running, coal, natural gas, is not just flip a switch. It takes time to get those things ramped up.
Well, and two, it's mass transportation is a problem as well, like planes, shipping containers, like all that kind of. So like,
yeah, it's a very different from.
Well,
like,
no, but I mean,
leap there. I don't know where you're going.
No, I mean it's like the problem I see all the time is like like you said, there'll still be gas powered stuff in the market, but like to reduce emissions. Like I've heard I've heard stuff of like electric planes as well. Like they only have a capacity
the
of like
for commercial electric vehicle, like plane and design did a test flight this week.
Yeah, I think one of them was like it only carried 9 people or something.
Yeah, it's pretty small.
One of them is, but they were like, well, it did it. Like it went to wherever. I think they're in the Northwest, aren't they? In the Northwest here somewhere.
Oh, I don't remember.
Yeah.
So all of it was like coming out of this article was really, or this particular set of research for this, the big takeaway, was I was really surprised that, we've already kind of got the capacity to do quite a bit, but if everyone charged their cars all at once, like California wouldn't be able to support it. But people don't charge all their cars all at once. Right. The other very interesting kind of big takeaway for this was the discussion. Something I hadn't thought about was the more electric vehicles we bring out, the more efficient those vehicles become. The better batteries become, the more efficient the batteries become. So like as the number of electric vehicles continue to rise on the road, the efficiency of those electric vehicles and the demand those vehicles are going to create doesn't scale up as quickly. And one of the really big takeaways, and I believe it was this LA Times article, or it might have been the article from Barron's, which that one was written November 14th of 2020 by Al Root. And it's titled, "Is There Enough Electricity for EVs? Yes. Here's who will charge them." And it's the Barron's article is more coming from a stock standpoint. It's talking about the companies that are manufacturing charging stations.
That's why they talk so much about. Because I've heard of Barron's before, and I was like, man, they're really bringing up stock prices. It's like,
well, and they are. they're a business bank publication, and they put out a lot of business news. So they're talking a lot about the companies that are actually going to be building these charging stations and setting this stuff up. And I think it was in here where they talk about kind of the shifting energy needs, and
I know in the LA Times thing, they brought up the fact that the original consensus for energy is to do everything at night when stuff's off peak, but now with sun and solar, you have to do it during the middle of the day, but then most people are gone. So like, how do you charge a car in the middle of the day? Like, you have to have more charging stations. They said it's almost psychological. They said too, because everybody knows, hey, I got to do all this stuff at night to use less power. But now with solar and wind, or at least solar anyway, that stuff happens in the middle of the day. So you have to, like this quote right here from the LA Times article, there's so much solar on the grid right now, Neldler said, that the new rates put forward by utilities have off-peak times in the middle of the day. So it makes more sense to charge your EV then. That adds another complication. However, under normal circumstances, cars used for work or commuting are away from home during the day. So the state's electrical infrastructure would have to be reconfigured to encourage workplace owners and operators to provide charging stations. So, yeah.
Now, the interesting thing in this article is it was written October of 2020. So, right, had we realized how many people are going to work from home, I was reading through the commentary on the charging article from Barron's, and someone brought up a really good point in the commentary, and it wasn't like a trolly comment. And basically that was like, so I charge at home, and most people charge at home. Like, most of us don't charge when we're out and about because our vehicles get 300, 400, 500 miles. Even if you only get 150, like, you go to work, you come home, and you charge overnight. So these charging
most people don't have like 100.
Yeah,
most people don't have large commutes going home. You go 30 miles to go to work and then come back.
And so the point that was brought up was like, anyone that lives in apartments or like condos, they're going to have a more difficult time because like getting that infrastructure built into those facilities is going to be more difficult. So they're going to be
some of them are there
charging infrastructure more.
Some of them are there, like being in new construction, seeing new residential places built with like parking garage Seattle. There is EV parking spots there, but like compared to normal parking spots, obviously EVs haven't taken over the world yet. But I could see if you are one of the few people that make enough money to afford an apartment in a high rise in Seattle, and you probably have a Tesla or something like that, and you go to pull in and there's like 3 EV spots, you're like, man, like I can't charge this thing. So yeah,
the other interesting point actually is in this LA Times article too, was growth and efficiency. They're talking about just in the last 10, 11 years. Where's the quote? So electrical demand in the state, California specifically, has fallen in relation to population over the last decade.
That was actually the other one I was going to bring up. But
according to California Energy Commission, growing by less than 2% since 2009, even though the population of California, and I'm going off script a little bit here, has grown by almost 7%. So I think that's part of the energy discussion that I haven't necessarily been considering. I think other people may not be as well, is efficiency across the board is increasing. We're seeing more efficient home design. We're seeing more efficient use of appliances. People are switching to LED lights instead of incandescent lights. And I think most companies have stopped making traditional incandescent light bulbs.
I think they're hard to find now. I mean, I don't think they're allowed. I think the little bit I know about building regulations, there is a push for more energy efficient everything, like building materials, and there's lighting, anything.
All of your different, like for building construction, there's all of your different energy certifications, right? My last
LEEDs and stuff like that. Yeah, it's like a LEED.
My last energy. My last IT company I worked for, one of our clients was an architecture firm, and they were creating a whole nother spin-off. They were branching off and making another architecture firm that focused specifically on high energy efficiency, sustainable building construction design. So, right, like we're it's kind of like the water article, right? Like, oh God, doom and gloom, doom and gloom, doom and gloom. But you actually get in and start reading the articles and actually looking at the information, and you're seeing that, maybe it's not as bad. And I think this is an area where we definitely do have a pretty high level of grief from politics, to stick to the theme of the of the show, because you're running into a very high level of contentiousness between conservative and liberal politicians. Like we just passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which
Mm-hmm.
puts a ton of money into building vehicle charging and energy efficiency. And so you've got a lot of like green policy put into this Inflation Reduction Act. And you're running into, of course, a lot of resistance from Republicans, because they always resist anything that's kind of green energy wise. And I do think that there is some valid arguments, right? Like we do need to continue to have oil, continue to have gas, particularly natural gas, electricity generation, and we're going to continue to need it. The frustration for me as a geek, as a nerd, is I'm a huge proponent for nuclear, and it's getting so much better. And small nuclear production is getting so much better. And there's not a whole lot of discussion out there. There was a little tiny bit in some of the stuff that I read through. And the government is starting to put together some test reactors. One with TerraPower,
like smaller,
one with
like
something
smaller,
else. Yeah,
smaller, yeah, like
small nuclear instead of large nuclear. And the newer reactors burn the fuel more efficiency. They have a much lower risk of meltdown and other disasters. Right, like there's a lot of newer technology in it. The beauty of nuclear is, of course, it is more stable, more reliable, more predictable, and it kind of fills that gap until we can get there with renewable.
I think from the left, I mean, I agree. Like, there is like, yeah, we need to keep the stuff going, but I think, like we've talked about it before, like the idea that the thing's not in your face, so you're not going to deal with it. So I think there's this feeling on the left of like, can we stop dragging our feet? Like sooner or later, we're going to have to make this switch. And I understand we're going to have to have gas and stuff like that. But the moment something goes wrong with either solar or wind, like in Texas, when they had that storm, the right always looks to see if we had all green energy, we would have been totally screwed. And it's like, well,
I mean, actually, it was the reason we had this crisis was because of green energy was the tagline on Texas. And there were definitely failings within the green energy infrastructure in Texas, but it all comes back to the failings across the grid, which was the power companies did not harden their equipment for cold weather.
Yeah, because they were like, "Oh, we're in Texas. We don't understand." Well, yeah. I mean, without redoing that episode, I mean, I think the thing that I'm feeling, and especially lately, like we talked about at the beginning of the episode, with the fact that it's 70-some odd degrees here in October and it's Washington, is like you just have this feeling of like we have to do something. We can't just go, well, what are we going to do? This is how it is. It's like especially like if you want to talk about American exceptionalism or whatever, no time in the history of America have we ever said, or anywhere really, not just America, have we ever said, well, we're good enough how we are. We don't need to change anything. It's like, no, this is all new technology that's, pushing it. Like we've never been one to rest on our laurels. And I just think this is a new thing that we can do. And what's the downside of having, being completely untethered from nations' problems, like, and producing your own energy, and also, creating new jobs in that sector, and also, like, and the offshoot of possibly having clean water and air. I mean, to me, those don't seem like downsides. Like I don't understand the boondoggle that the conservatives have. Like,
I don't think that any conservative would be like, no, we need polluted water and polluted air.
Well,
I think there's a single person who is a Captain Planet style villain who's out there polluting on purpose. And I think one of the really big takeaways I took from reading these articles is the narrative that like we need to make the switch now, we're not doing enough, is a little bit of a misnomer. There's a surprising amount of renewable solar and or wind generated power in the United States. I was shocked at how much of our grid is actually already coming from those sources.
Yeah.
In fact, what was it? It's something like 40% of electricity generated in the United States is carbon neutral, but 20% of that is nuclear. but the nuclear is going away. The nuclear plants we have in the United States are old and are dying. Like, not dying literally, but like they're going to have to get shut down. They have a lifetime.
I think one thing that's going to blow you away is when I was reading the Inflation Reduction Act article by energy.gov, which it basically just has the stats of all that stuff, which is cool. Yep. But what I clicked on and will blow you away is the Palo Verde generating station. And I looked at like basically it's websites, but it's stats of, what it does, how much it says right here. It's in the Southwest, I think in Arizona. It generates more than 32 million megawatt hours annually, enough to power more than 4 million homes and businesses in the Southwest. It's the largest contributor to Arizona's clean energy. This is all from their website. So, I mean, obviously, they actually pay their taxes, which is weird that they'd have to put that. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, 2,000 full-time workers. And 1 in 3, I don't know. It just seems really cool. And I clicked on the informational video a la Jurassic Park on how nuclear energy is produced. And they have programs for local schools too, where they'll teach people about nuclear science, which is pretty neat. Stuff like that.
So, I mean, all of that to say, like, it was really interesting. Another really big takeaway in reading through all these articles was the, oh man, I had a complete brain freeze there.
It just went away.
Yeah, no, there's a really cool other point in there that I can't remember.
You're standing on the Thought train platform and they took off and you were trying to get your ticket in time to get on the train. You're like, no. Wait. The steam is coming off the side.
No, there was a related to energy usage in the United States. One of the really interesting things was that like 50% of energy usage in the U.S. is for transportation. Cars, trucks, cars specifically is where the vast majority of energy used in the U.S. is being used. And that's because they're measuring energy, not just electricity, but gas, oil, everything. Yeah. So, right, like the biggest needle we have when we have the climate change, global pollution argument, right? Like I think the biggest needle to move is in internal combustion vehicles. The movement towards electric vehicles has a lot of value. The challenge, of course, with electric vehicles is, however, that producing the batteries is very damaging to the environments where it's done. Getting those materials is getting more and more difficult. So advancements in battery technology are hyper critical, right? Like we've talked about it before, I think, on cobalt specifically and the challenges of getting cobalt. But it's not just cobalt, it's the lithium, the other things that we're using in battery production right now. So battery production for transportation is going to be hyper critical. Now, solid state batteries are getting closer. I watched some videos this week on solid state batteries. I didn't share any articles on it, but there's a really good article I read this week on Toyota having Toyota and Honda, I believe, both kind of announced in like 2020, 2019, somewhere in that range that like, hey, we're going full solid state. We're almost there. And yet they don't have they've got one test vehicle that has been seen in the public. No one else has driven it, that Toyota used during the Olympics in Tokyo, 2021.
Yeah, I didn't hear about
that. It drove slow following the procession for like the torch lighting, and that's it. But once solid state batteries come around, they require less material to build. They can be made smaller. They're much higher energy density and much more rapid recharging. So again, that's another place where like, hey, we can really reduce the strain on the grid. We can get much better mileage out of the vehicles. Another advancement this week, Tesla has finally started actually producing their semis. So they're working on the first trucks that they're going to deliver to Pepsi. So, right, we're making advances in these technologies, and you know, the energy grid is getting better. I think we're producing less pollution than we think we're producing. I think it's sensationalized headlines are really kind of building up this panicky narrative.
Well,
But
I think
you look at like the Koch
you and I,
brothers.
but you and I talked about it last episode. Like there is value in that as well because you want people to act. You know what I mean? Like the idea of just saying everything is fine is we're going to keep
balance
doing.
in is this I'm doing this because I want people to act and I need to build up urgency versus I'm doing this because it gets clicks and I need to sell advertising. Because
Yeah, I know. I get that.
to strike that boy that cried wolf balance.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the people that I try to listen to are trying to be measured, but it's hard to just be like, is there any good news? And then you hear that, and you're like, okay, we're fine then. And it's like, no, we need, and so like I try not to listen to people that are saying, we're going to die. I just think that we can make like that's my thing is like we could be better at this, guys. Like it's like we could be much better at this.
And the reason I bring this up is because yesterday's conversation specifically, you were talking about like, oh man, like I'm really stressed. Like, we haven't had the weather and I'm just kind of feeling this pressure of like, what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And right. Like, I think it's already come out from the majority of scientific sources that we have hit the tipping point. Like there's nothing that we can do to stop climate change from a global warming perspective. Like we're already crested the hill and the damage is done. So now what we're doing is how do we mitigate it and then like let nature return to its natural course?
Well, we have to make it. It's the old joke, and I've heard this from scientists actually that are like, listen, it's the old Simpsons joke where you could say it's bad, 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 or bad, bad, bad. So right now we're in that category of it could be terrible or it could be bad. You know what I mean? So like we want to just make it bad. We don't want to make it terrible. You know what I mean? Is like how I'm hearing it.
And so as I read through these articles and I see like, hey, there's like it's not all doom and gloom. The reason I think that's important is not from the perspective of the damage is already done, and it's too late, but to say like, yeah, okay, it's there, but we are making progress. We are moving in the right direction, and maybe we're not moving fast enough. But I mean, it's the nature of moving 8 billion people who do not agree on anything in the same direction. It's the ultimate herding of cats.
Which, by the way, it's having 2 young cats is not as hard as people say when you have a laser pointer. Just want to point that out. When they follow the laser pointer into their food source, that's pretty good. Now,
so basically what you're saying is we need to get everyone
a giant laser
focused on one point.
Yeah. Which is what happens to cats.
There's a few ways we can do that, and I don't like any of them.
Well, I do like the idea of obviously if you force people to do something, they're not going to do it. I mean, we don't need to litigate that through COVID, but if you make the incentives there where people are like, hey, because like I would love to go electric, and stuff like that, but like the cars right now are too expensive, even with the federal subsidies.
It's not just the cars too, though, Joe. Like you don't live in a situation where you could charge at home.
Yeah, I know.
You could drag a cord out to your cars, but where you live,
totally
how long before those cords get stolen?
No, they just cut them here. They wouldn't be smart enough to actually steal the cords. They just cut them in half, and you're like, well, no, I don't know.
What are you talking about, Joe? That's copper, man.
I know. Yeah, that's true.
That's the next hit of meth.
They got 4 feet of copper coming out of my window or whatever. Like, good luck, guys. No, but I mean that's it. And for a lot of people, I think it's the idea of you see that price tag on a new vehicle, and you're like, oh man, I can't.
The upfront cost is not really offset by the savings. So I am a giant proponent for hybrid. I have been for a long time because I think that is a great way to bridge the gap. We can reduce our need for energy usage by moving more and more aggressively into hybrid. Toyota has heavily committed into hybrid. They haven't gone all electric because they don't want to do it until they get to solid state batteries. And so they've been pretty public. The battery technology isn't there. It's not really the answer. There's been some definitely strong butting of heads between, the Tesla community, even Nissan being more aggressive in all electric. But I think Toyota, to their point, is right to a degree. we need companies like Tesla, Chevy's doing it, like everyone's doing it. Even
Ford's
Toyota
doing
does
it, I
make
know.
plug-in
Ford's
hybrids where it's it's a plug-in electric, but it has hybrid to cover the gap. We need companies to do it because it's making it affordable, right? Like the Tesla pushing that technology, making their patents open.
Are there patents open, Tesla? I thought some of them were not.
I don't know if all of them are, but a massive amount of their patent library they've made public. And it was a few years back.
I know. Do they still have a? I heard somewhere they have a proprietary plug, charging plug thing.
I do believe that is accurate.
Yeah.
But just because their patents are open doesn't mean they're not necessarily going to use a proprietary plug. I mean,
no, I'm just saying that could be. Some people pointed to like, hey, if this was like universal or something, then
I think it'll move that way eventually, right? Like Tesla's going to want more of the charging space. They're going to want people to use their superchargers, one way or the other. But
yeah, because you still charge for them. Like I've seen, the Town and Country video reviews of like, hey, we went to Walmart and plugged it in, and yeah, I mean, we paid, but we paid way less than fuel. Like we recharged this whole truck, like a Ford Lightning, on $20. Or
I think it depends on where you live, right? So. Yeah. A couple of things I was looking for when I was researching this, and I was a little bit disappointed. You and I talked about it a little bit about like how much impact does it have on the grid when people start electrifying their own homes. The LA Times article talked about it a little bit, where they talked about part of the reason that they've had a 7% population growth, but only a 2% increase in energy need is because people are adding solar to their homes. Mm-hmm. So how much does that change the need? Yeah. And so that was a super interesting idea and concept to me. But like we talked about, I looked into doing solar on our house. How much of a benefit do we get? And for me, it's an energy independence thing. One way or the other, when I discuss this, I don't want to come at it from the perspective of climate change. And whoever's listening, believe in climate change or don't believe in climate change, I'm looking at it from a perspective of energy independence and from a perspective of really cool tech, because I'm a nerd.
Yeah, I mean, I think I talked off board about the fact that if you truly believe in independence in general, then you should be pushing towards clean energy. If you take all the climate change arguments out of it, you don't have to rely on someone else to get your energy needs. You are literally producing,
clean energy is the only form of energy that's truly, maybe the right word is democratized, right? Like it's the only energy you can buy micro enough that an individual person can generate enough electricity to supply all their own needs through micro wind generators, and you can get really small wind generators and solar.
Or solar in your backyard if you're able to do it and all that kind of stuff.
Backyard, on your roof, right? Like there are some other kind of cool things you can do that help with that too, right? Like, and if you're interested, check out the channel, Matt Undecided. He talks about a lot of really cool different energy things that are coming about that are making
he's building his home right now. He's supposed to be like net neutral. He's going through that process right now.
Solar, there's all kinds of really cool things. And for me, like, I love the cool tech. Any place where we have the budget to make ourselves more efficient pays off dividends long term. But I was looking at doing solar here in Washington. Our electricity is so cheap, so cheap that like putting solar on our roof would take us like 15 years to pay for it. Now, electricity will go up over time as demand goes up. But it stayed pretty stable for quite a long time. Like the growth in energy prices is not skyrocketing.
Yeah.
For us. Because here we rely extremely heavily on hydroelectric power, which, right, like the cost of hydroelectric hasn't gotten any more expensive because
the rivers still flow, luckily, up here.
Right. Right. I was trying to think of a good way to say it, right? Like we don't have to go buy more water. Whereas anywhere that's having to buy oil or natural gas, like some of these articles we're talking about what's going on in Europe right now, or like electricity has doubled.
Yeah. Like in the UK. Well, and then that pipeline got exploded. I don't know.
Well, that pipeline wasn't in use, but
Well, it sure can't be now.
Yeah. If Putin wasn't a wingnut, that pipeline would be in use, but it never got turned on because it was supposed to get turned on like in the time frame after they invaded Ukraine or immediately before or something.
Oh.
But I mean, talk about an excuse for energy independence needs.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of conservatives come back to, well, this is what we need the Keystone Pipeline for, and this is where we need, more drilling for, so we're not reliant on other sources. And I don't disagree with those. From a national security standpoint, providing our own energy and having our own energy is useful. And oil is here and will be necessary for probably the next 50 years. And certain forms of transportation, we're still going to continue to need oil, gasoline, jet fuel, right? Like, it's not going to go away. So creating energy independence by having the Keystone Pipeline to do that, by having more oil wells to drill and more refineries to produce our own oil is a good thing long term. I think that's an area where on the left we run into this naivete that like we can't have any more of it because we're going to destroy the world. Well, great. Then enjoy freezing to death in the winter and baking in the summer.
Right.
In the interim. Now, the counterpoint to that is you also can't be so naive to think that's the solution. Those are finite resources that do harm our environment. So we need to be doing both at the same time.
Yeah, and then, in the Venn diagram, one of them will be, hopefully phased out. So
right. And eventually it would be, right? I mean, the ultimate hope is eventually we end up with nuclear fusion, and nuclear fusion takes care of all the future energy needs.
Yeah, then you gotta worry about anything. I don't know.
What was that?
I said, then we don't have to worry about anything with nuclear fusion. I said it very quickly. Let's see. The one article I did, what did you think about the Elon Musk article? He basically just says, we have to double energy capacity. Apparently this was in German as well, and they're kind of translating this from a German summit he went to.
So he was speaking in Germany at an event, and he was like, yeah, we're going to need to double our energy capacity. And this is sort of where my whole thesis was. If we go to an all electric grid for vehicles, we're going to need to produce way more electricity to charge these vehicles, because the demand is going to skyrocket as cars as internal combustion cars phase out, and electric cars phase in.
Correct.
So I think he makes an extremely strong point. What is his quote in here? It'll take another 20 years for cars to be fully electric, and I think that is ambitious. People will hold on to their cars for a long time until it's no longer cost effective for them. Because there's a lot of people that don't have the money to go buy a new car, and used electric has some major problems.
Well, I will say, I think one of the problems that you mentioned earlier was, for whatever I feel about Tesla, their cars are on the market and you can still purchase them. But like the Rivian and the Ford Lightning and the ones you mentioned,
Rivian.
Yeah, the Rivian. They're still difficult to get, right? And it doesn't seem like they're able to produce them in mass quantities. So that's part of the problem is competition makes everything better, right? So like the more people you have doing stuff in the market, people can have a choice and say, well, I can't afford the Tesla, but this Ford, the Mach-E, even though I hate the way it looks, and I can't believe they put the Mustang thing on it, and I can't believe that Ford would do that, I can afford that because it's a sedan. You know what I mean? Like it's more affordable.
So like you've got the Chevy Volt, you've got the Nissan Leaf, you've got you've got the e-Golf, right? Volkswagen's electric car. Most of them don't have the range that Tesla does, but they're all getting better at it. And some of them have some pretty stinking good range. In fact, I do think there's some electrical vehicles out there that are more affordable than a Model 3 that actually have better mileage out the gate.
Yeah, but again, that's making it affordable on a mass scale. I don't know about Tesla's waiting situation. I know don't you have to still get on a wait list to get one?
Yeah, it's getting a lot shorter. Right now, demand, because of economic conditions around the world, demand is down, particularly in China. And man, oh man, what's going on in China economically? Because of what's going on in China economically, demand in China is very low. but they manufacture in China very cheap. So they're going to be shipping those cars around the world starting towards the end of last month. And, you know, that's going to help keep affordability down in the United States. It's going to reduce wait list times. And I think to some degree, not having a wait list will sort of help increase demand. But, right, there's more competition. Tesla hasn't had as much competition as they do now, and more is coming, and more is coming. And,
I mean, that, again, to take out what I feel about Tesla, I think that will be interesting because, you know, to bring this back to video games, with Xbox Game Pass, you know, for $15 a month, if you got the Ultimate, you got a bunch of free games on PC. Well, not free, but you paid for them, like Netflix. There's stuff on PC, there's stuff on whatever. And for a long time, Sony was selling tons of copies of their consoles, and they still are. But they thought, we don't have to do anything like that. Well, they just recently released their own tiered program, kind of like Game Pass, because I think they felt the pressure of, oh man, you know, you don't have to buy games through Xbox. You can just pay them $15 a month and get all these games, all of our first party games, or all their first party games hit. What are we doing? And I think Tesla will have to do that if, oh man, Ford's doing this with charging or that, or, you know, like, oh man, they're getting this higher capacity. How do we do that? You know, like
competition in the marketplace is amazing. It's it's going to drive this this innovation. I don't want to use the word revolution. There's another word that I'm trying to think of to describe it, but competition is what is going to drive the shift to electric vehicles faster and faster and faster as we go. And we're getting close to the tipping point where I think last year, like 7% of new vehicles sold were EVs.
Yeah.
And it's getting the new cool tech thing, and it's beginning to adopt people that way. It's becoming accessible enough from a budgetary standpoint, from a distance standpoint, that people can do it. Yeah, we're getting close to this tipping point where there's going to be a seismic shift in the amount of electric vehicles on the road.
I mean, also to bring this back to the grief of politics, you know, all these energy costs hit lower income people more than they hit, you know, obviously the high earners. If you're not making a lot of money and all of a sudden your energy thing doubles, it's like, what? You know, like I could barely afford, you know, my power bill right now. I can't afford a, you know, 50% increase or whatever. I can't absorb that, you know?
And kind of humorously, here in Washington State, where electricity is so cheap, gas is one of the most expensive. Washington State is one of the most expensive states for gas, even though our electricity is dirt cheap, because we have such high taxes on gasoline. So, like, to your point, people in the lower income brackets that have to commute further to work because they can't afford to live closer to their work center are now paying way more money. An electric vehicle would actually probably save them money, but then they've got to make that payment for that new car.
Yeah.
And again, why I'm such a huge fan of hybrid, because you can have both. But just like electric, hybrid vehicles have major challenges with their batteries too. They wear out, they get old over time, and they have to be replaced. And those are very expensive repairs.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm still excited reading these articles. I mean, I think I just had several moments of despair when I called you on the phone the other day. I think it was just the smoke getting to me. It had been a week and you just smell smoke and you can't see the skyline because it's just a haze.
Hazy.
And you're like, and then, you know, I was at,
the moon is red.
Yeah, right. I was watching the sunset Friday night with a friend, and I was like, "Is this it? Is this what it's gonna be? Is this what it's gonna be like?" So, yeah, but I mean, you know, reading these articles and finding out that, you know, things are getting more efficient, people are using less power, and that we actually have an increase in capacity of green energy. I mean, it was kind of cool. You know, I mean, the other articles you talked about were good, but I really liked the LA Times article, and I liked the Gov article just because it brought in the Palo Verde thing, and I got to read about that. You know, that article just kind of went over the facts of how much money they're dumping in for green energy and stuff like that. And for whatever reason, they use the stock footage of the Palo Verde thing, but that made me look that up. So that was interesting to know, like, well, it's like, what other areas can we build it? And like, the only thing I don't know is how long it took to build that facility, you know?
Building nuclear facilities is very time consuming.
Isn't it like 8 years or 7 years or something like that?
7 to 10 years from permitting to turning on. So like if we're going to build nuclear plants, like we need to be doing it right now. Now that will change with micronuclear. When we start doing small scale nuclear power generation, it will take less time to do it. But I do think that there is a need within government to greenlight and streamline some of this. As we've learned, right, gas and natural gas and coal and oil, those are getting more and more expensive. We don't want to do any more coal if we can avoid it in the United States.
The worst.
But
coal anywhere really is bad. I mean, it's
the reason I say that, like in the United States, there's a lot of resistance to it. There are other parts of the world where they don't care; they need the electricity. They would build more coal. Yeah. I'm trying to think of one of those articles that I read, and I read a ton more I didn't share because I was trying to find the specific information on like what's the direction we're headed with energy related to EVs, related to just more electronics and technology in our life period, smart homes and everything else that we're doing. There was one country where it's like 80% coal.
Yes.
And they buy the vast majority of China, I think, buys a massive amount of coal. I know North Korea runs a lot of coal. Now, North Korea isn't producing enough energy that they're really pushing the needle a whole lot. But when you think of, okay, so they've only got a few plants, but they're all coal. They don't scrub. And, it can be really bad. The ultimate advance in the technology is really encouraging. I think we're moving in the right direction. Technologically, we're getting better with renewable energy sources or natural energy sources. Oil is natural, so I guess renewable is the right word. I just don't know.
Probably green or renewable.
Wind isn't really particularly renewable because it just happens. You don't use it and then have to regenerate it. But I guess it categorizes as renewable. Carbon neutral.
There you go.
The growth in technology for carbon neutral electricity is pretty cool. The growth in technology for carbon neutral transportation is pretty cool. Yeah. I think we're going to end up in this hodgepodge of what are we going to use for quite a while. It's going to be back and forth. Maybe we do hydrogen, maybe we do hybrid, maybe we do electric, and we'll kind of go back and forth until solid state batteries, which will revolutionize electric vehicles again. And once solid state batteries are manufactured in mass, how we charge our cars that are electric, trucks, and how far those vehicles can travel and how rapidly they can recharge will change in orders of magnitude. People that aren't following it are just going to be floored. Like, wait a minute. 2 years ago, I bought an electric car. My maximum I could get was 500 miles, and now it's 2,000. What happened?
There's a great. I don't know.
And I'm grabbing numbers at random, so don't get me for. That.
I'll probably link in the show description tab or whatever. But there was, I want to say it was Top Gear. They actually got a Ford Lightning and were in Texas for a truck show, and they were driving through Texas with the Ford Lightning, and people were like, I'm never going to get rid of my gas car, and they were just trying to show people the benefits, which I think is another thing. It's not just that, but your circle of friends and stuff, no, I got one. Why don't we take it for a drive? And you're like, wow. And then if the price is low, you're like, this is great. I don't have to worry about this. I don't have to worry about that. And one thing I want to bring up really quickly, we're almost out of time. The old documentary came out a long time ago, Who Killed the Electric Car. One of the things they did bring up is that all the stuff in your car you need, brakes are a bad example. You need brakes in any car, but fuel filter, all the internals, all those parts, that's a whole industry that will go away if we switch to electric, right? You're not going to need an oil filter in your electric car. So all that kind of stuff is another transition. It's there's a lot of money in this,
there's a whole economy behind vehicles that will go away, but a new economy will come into play.
Yeah, it always does. We used to use horse-drawn buggy and carriages, and those went away, and we were like, well, what are we going to do with all these carriages? Well, we're just not going to build any more carriages. We have a car now,
But I don't blame conservatives for getting super defensive and dismissive of a lot of stuff that's said when Biden comes out and says things like, well, all those oil rig workers are just going to have to learn how to code. All those miners are just going to have to learn how to code. Like, really? Yeah. Really? Like, there's a lot of other places that we can move. What? Although, I think Biden is almost as bad as Trump at gaffes when he opens his mouth.
Yeah, well, when you're an old man, and let's be honest, I know Biden was older, but Trump wasn't a spring chicken. Like, there's a whole level of I don't care anymore when you get to a certain age where you're just like, I don't really care.
Very, very, very true.
So, Adam, before we leave, what do you want to plug?
Well, as always, of course, plug my own YouTube channel, Your Agent Guide, and just my real estate business, helping people find talented professional real estate agents in their area. And also, if you're in the Northwest, I could be your agent or help you find an agent.
Yeah, do that. Your videos are good. Like I said, I've said it before. They're short. They're incredibly informative. And since I don't look at charts or care about numbers like you do break it down in a short amount of time. I mean, again, that's what I really like. I don't want to watch an hour video breaking down the markets. You would probably love to produce.
Here's a spreadsheet.
Right. And I don't know if I would watch that. But when you're like, here's a 7 to 9 minute video on why this is important, I'm like, I'm there. I got it. I have 7 to 9 minutes that I can devote to this. For me, obviously, Gaming with Grief, that comes out this week. In fact, I have to record an episode later today, so support us there. Go to our YouTube channel, The Grief of Politics. The video is up now. You can watch our smiling faces instead of just listen to the audio. It happens the same time as the audio version, so they both hit. The audio version hits a little bit earlier on the 20th. The video version hits at 7 a.m. on YouTube. On the 20th of every month. Next month, I haven't really announced what I was going to talk about, so I'll let you pick, Avin. One of these I think you're just going to pick because you care about it more, because we just mentioned it. I was going to talk about voting for housing, so I think you're going to pick housing, but I would like to talk about housing because I think there's a big housing crisis, and when I just said I don't want to watch an hour video on housing, I guess we're going to talk about housing for an hour. So I guess I was just a big liar 5 minutes ago.
You just told people not to watch our show, Joe. Yeah, no, I would definitely pick housing. There is a massive housing crisis in our country.
And it affects people, different ways. It affects people in lower income and even people with upper income where you're in a neighborhood where you're like, I make money, I can't buy a house, stuff like that.
I make $300,000 a year, but I'm basically living paycheck to paycheck because all of my money goes to my mortgage.
Yeah, like everything that I'm paying. So we'll talk about housing next month. I think that's it for this episode. Again, I'm trying to think of anything else. No other announcements or anything. Yeah, we did your thing. We did my thing. So,
sounds good.
Yeah. Oh, anyway, I got a weird text. So I was like, right when I was like, what is that? Witchcraft on my screen. So I guess with that, everybody have a good month and we will talk to you again next month.